Each week we're putting a little excerpt from the book on the top, on the outside of your flyer, and it says, ultimately, the word beyond captures the true meaning of spirituality, and Maggie talked about that in her meditation. In its most basic sense, going beyond means going past where you are. It means not staying in your current state. When you constantly go beyond yourself, there are no more limitations. There are no more boundaries. And listen to this. Limitations and boundaries only exist at the place where you stop going beyond. Limitations and boundaries only exist at the places where you stop going beyond. That's our lesson today. If you never stop, then you go beyond boundaries, beyond limitations, and beyond the sense of a restricted self. In several sentences later in the book, it says, beyond is infinite in all directions. Ooh. Think for a moment how many times you have been told that you can do anything, that you can be anything, that there are no limits. Have you been told that? Yep. Have you looked in your life and said, oh, it doesn't look so limitless to me? Anybody know that feeling? Yeah, we all do. And so in our book, Michael Singer refers to the allegory of the cave and Plato, from Plato. And so I had to look it up because I didn't know Plato's allegory of the cave. And since it's only a few sentences, I'm going to read it to you. Plato has Socrates describe a gathering of people who have lived chained to a wall of a cave all their lives, facing a blank wall. The people watch shadows projected on the wall from things passing in front of a fire behind them. And then they begin to give names to the shadows. The shadows are as close as the prisoners get to viewing reality. He then explains how the philosopher is like a prisoner who is freed from the cave and comes to understand that the shadows on the wall do not make up reality at all, or he can perceive the true form of reality rather than the mere shadows seen by the prisoners. It's probably as deep into philosophy as I'll ever get. But can you imagine the cave, and can you imagine that all you ever saw were the shadows, and there's the short one, and let's call him Shorty, and he's the round one. We're going to call him Fluffy. And you build this reality. There's an allegory in our book about a person who builds a home. He finds this beautiful field, a gorgeous field, a sunlit field, the most beautiful field. And he builds a house. Oh, he loves his house. It's the perfect climate-controlled house. And he's out in the field, and he doesn't always feel so secure, so he gets double locks on the doors, and then he gets hurricane shutters, the kind you can't see through, and he has them closed and bolted down, and he lives inside his house, and it's perfect. He reads and he writes. He has a very silent companion who has a place in this house that, cooks and cleans. And he just lives this perfect life, and years go by, and he has these full spectrum lights, and it's just wonderful. It's magnificent. No TV, no phone, no internet, nothing. Just his reading and his writing. And one day, one of the bulbs burns out. Ooh. And pretty soon another bulb burns out. And there comes a day that all the bulbs are burned out in his house. And there's no light. And so all he has are his emergency candles. And he lights the candle. He and his companion, his housekeeper, they hoard the candle and use them sparingly. He can no longer read and write, but, got to preserve that light. And one day his companion comes in and says, look, come see what I found. In the basement, there are these flashlights. And the flashlights, if you shake them, they light up. You can just, every time when they go down, you just shake it and it lights up. And so they take the flashlights out and they set them around, and they spend their day going around and shaking the flashlight to keep the lights going. And in this travail together, this common goal to keep the lights lit, they fall in love. And they spend their life shaking the lights. They get up in the morning, the first thing they have to do is make a round and shake all the lights. Now they've got these books and they read, and one day the guy reads in this book that there is a source of light, an ever-ending source of light that never ends. What could that be? Lived so long in the box, in the house, that he no longer knows the source of light that's outside the doors. Now, it's hard for us to imagine that happening. It's hard for us to imagine that we could build a house and close off the light and forget about the sun. But in truth, in the allegory, what we've done in our life is we've forgotten about the sun that lives inside of us. The light that's right here, the ongoing, ever-ending, never-ending light. But very carefully, you and I have constructed a box or a house that we live in. And it's not one out there, it's one that's in our head. And when I was thinking about this, I was thinking about Lincoln Logs. Are any of you old enough to remember Lincoln Logs? Well, I asked Gerald, and he said he'd never heard of Lincoln Logs. And I said, well, there were these little logs that you could get, and they would slot together, and you could build a cabin. He said, well, that didn't sound like very much fun. And I said, well, they were great. I mean, you were
any cabin you want.
Any cabin, any design. You just might need more Lincoln Logs.
Right.
But you and I build that box inside our head, that house inside our head, one Lincoln log at a time. And so I was trying to think of examples of where we have done that. And the primary example I'm going to talk about is public speaking. How many of you in here fear public speaking? Yeah, a number of you fear public speaking. If you have responded on those little connection cards at some time that you would receive either a text or a recorded call, pardon me, I called last week and left a recorded call for 67 people. Wow. And I said some things. I need help for Thanksgiving Eve. I need people that will tell what they are thankful for, to come to the Thanksgiving Eve service and say what they're thankful for. I need people to paint on Saturday. And by the way, we have this wonderful, marvelous Douglas Bluefeather concert on Friday night. I didn't get much response. I got one person that said they would help on Thanksgiving Eve. And I got one person that said they could not see public speaking for themselves, but they would come paint. And, I was willing to say, come and paint. But public speaking is one of the greatest fears. And I thought about how we build that up. Where does our fear of public speaking come from? Did it come from being in a class and a child and you had to memorize something and stand up and recite it and you couldn't remember? That happened to me. Does it come from the fear that people are looking at you? Is that what it comes from? And I thought, as I thought about it, I have my own Lincoln logs around public speaking. I can't get up here to speak if I don't have notes. Well, I don't have my notes. There have probably been 5 times in 17 years I've gotten up here without a prepared talk. Let me rephrase that. There have been 3 times I've gotten up here without a prepared talk. Now, there have been 2 or 3 times I've gotten up here, had a prepared talk, but forgot to bring it. And I had to look at myself. What is it, Beth, that says you cannot get up here and speak? Are you going to say something inappropriate? Yeah, I have. I've done that even when I had notes. Am I going to say something that looks foolish? I've done that with notes. What is it about the notes that I have to hang on to? What is it about the fear of public speaking that half of you aren't willing to say, I'll come and say what I'm thankful for. I want to share with the world what I'm thankful for. How much better would our world be if we went around sharing what we were thankful for? Thanksgiving Eve is the perfect time for that. Maggie does these beautiful Taizé services with readings, and sometimes we have to guilt people into doing a reading because people are afraid. They're afraid. What are some of the other things where we have, I did have to jot down some notes. What about wearing the right clothes? When you're going somewhere, you have to wear the appropriate attire. Anybody understand that? That Lincoln log about that. That box that you've built. Have you ever gone somewhere where you didn't think you were dressed appropriately, and when it was over, you realized it didn't matter, it wouldn't have mattered what you wore? When you come to church in here on Sunday, you're going to see everything and anything. If you go to the King Center, you can dress up or you can wear blue jeans. We have these mental ideas, these constructs that we make. I grew up in an era. It was an error. When you got on the airplane, you wore a suit and hat and gloves. Would I do that today? No. But there was a time when that was what was appropriate. And so we worked within what was appropriate. There was a time I graduated from ministerial school in 1997 or 98. I started here in 99. I must have graduated in 98. Okay, I graduated in 98. And as ministerial students, we were not allowed, we had to do talks, lessons. We were not allowed to wear slacks. We were not allowed to wear open-toed shoes.
That sounds like the United Pentecost.
Sounds like the United Pentecost, yes. But it was the mode of the day. And we had one classmate, Daisy Guevara. God loved Daisy. Daisy was from Chile, I believe, or Argentina one. And she found unity through reading a Spanish daily word. And she came and she worked for Silent Unity. She did many of the books that are translated into Spanish, Daisy did most of the translation for. Daisy had a doctorate in education. Worked at Silent Unity, did the translating. She came and she would wear pants every time. And nobody said anything to her. She dared to buck the system. She dared to do beyond. And I remember when I came here, I remember the first 5-10 years, I didn't wear slacks. Jane, thank you for permission. What is the construct in your mind? What is the something that you've built in your mind? In our society today, what are some of the constructs that we're living with? I'm asking a question, looking for a response.
Freedom.
Freedom? And what about freedom?
There's responsibility with freedom.
There's responsibility with freedom.
It isn't free.
It isn't free. Freedom isn't free.
I remember the big deal that was made about communism back in the day.
Oh yeah, remember communism? For those of you who are young, you never experienced getting under your desk in case of a nuclear attack. But that was one of the things we practiced.
What about ISIS today?
ISIS today. Oh yes, it's a mental construct. I heard someone say, look what those peaceful, loving Muslims are doing. No, they're not. It's not all Muslims. There are people joining ISIS they may have started out Muslim, and there may be people who are joining ISIS who started out Christian. They have their own agenda. So one of the things at the Parliament of the World's Religions is we talked about the fact that we are branding our young Muslim youth. And they're beginning to feel as outcast. And we're making them more vulnerable by our comments about Muslims. When the Muslim people are not our problem. But it is one of those constructs that's happening in our society right now.
Mm-hmm. Kind of like how, Christians sometimes are getting lumped into the whole, the Westboro Baptist, that's not all Christians.
So what Kim said is that some Christians are being lumped into with the people of Westboro Baptist, the people that would do mean and hateful things.
What happened to love your enemy?
What happened to love your enemy?
What happened?
What happened to that? That's a novel concept that is beyond the limitation of our box. Big time beyond the limitation of our box. Yes, sir.
There are people that have forgotten their purpose in life, and the only thing that makes them good, happy, is to destroy anybody they can.
So
There's a crazy cause, the same as a cancer cell, as a forgotten cell.
So the gentleman said there are people who have forgotten their purpose in life. And so they start hurting other people. And what I want to say is it's not just them, those ISIS people, it's us. We all have in our inner house, we all have someone that we think is outside and we're inside. We think we all have managed to say, we're better than they are. Our clothes are prettier, we have more money, our skin's the right color, we go to the right church. We're better.
Nails done?
We have our nails done. We have our toenails done. And what Michael Singer says is that when we get to this boundary of our thinking, when we walk up to that boundary, we feel discomfort. And that we have a choice that we'll either step back or we'll step beyond. And we have that opportunity every day.
Isn't that like bullying?
Bullying, oh yes. The people that bully, they're doing that to build themselves up. And then the person being bullied has that chance of walking up to the bully and stepping back. And I don't, in every case there's an appropriate stepping beyond. What Michael Singer says, we get up to that boundary, and if things shift or things change, we are really discomforted. And I know that when I first started going to Unity many, many moons ago, if I told someone some of the things that I believed, boy, did I get an earful. I got an earful because what I believed, if something I believed could possibly have merit, or could possibly be right, or could possibly be another way of looking at something, it meant that the way that person was looking at life was wrong. And what I believe, where we see this term radical fundamentalism, it's because as the world is changing, as we are stepping away from fundamentalism, those people who are fundamental have to hold on to their walls tighter. They have to fight harder to keep their box in place. But what we see and what we know is that it's breaking down. Even as we see them getting tighter and tighter and louder and pushing more, we know that that's just a sign that they're breaking down. And how do I know that? Because I can flick the channels on my television, and almost every minister and every talk I see on television has unity in it. Janine brought a book in, and it was a book for a class that's a Jewish class, and I opened it. It could be a unity textbook. Truth is prevailing. Consciousness is changing, and you and I, if we want to be enlightened, we have to be willing to look at what we believe and push the boundaries. And that boundary might be what we're willing to do. That boundary might be that you need to step up and tell people what you're thankful for on Thanksgiving Eve. That may be what pushes your boundary. Am I trying to use guilt? Yes. My fellow churches and ministers use it very effectively. I'm trying to use it. You are infinite. You are infinite. You have infinite capabilities, infinite opportunities. And Nick, I know that those opportunities are so much larger in your mind than they are in my mind. That your imagination is so much broader that you're able to see beyond the walls that I've built in my life, or the wall that your mom's built in her life. Caitlin, I know that you've been stepping beyond. You've been walking out, stepping beyond. And so we support you in that. There are people in our congregation who are making major steps, dreaming big. Actually, this group has been dreaming big. We're dreaming about being in the other end of this building. We're dreaming big. Dreaming about a kitchen. Absolutely. Dreaming about a kitchen. So this week, you're going to have this opportunity. Something's going to come up. This morning, I was driving to church. I got to Croton and Lake Washington, and there was a car sitting there in my lane, and the light was green. In my mind, a car on the street at a green light ought to be going. And I slowed down and I stopped behind him. Now, I probably had time to go around him had I not just pulled up to, I couldn't come. I'm sitting there, and finally I tapped my horn, and he tapped his horn back, and he moved on. But I have this mental construct that says if you're on the street, you need to be going when the light is green. And I had a moment of getting upset, of being uncomfortable, because he wasn't going and the light was green. So something's going to happen to you today. If you're watching football, there's going to be a football player who does not do what you think he ought to do. And for all of you who come and come to the flute workshop, which is a wonderful workshop. I've done it every time that Doug has been here. It's wonderful because I can just imagine that I could make that beautiful music that he makes. And yet in the workshop, there's some noises I make that will not sound so beautiful. And I will have to step beyond that if I ever want to get to the point of making beautiful music. I invite you to step beyond this week, beyond the limitation. It is limitless. It's infinite. You have infinite potential, and don't forget it. Thank you.